Hey there, Grumpy Old Fart here. For those of you who don't know, I started Grumpy Old Fart to express my political and social opinions and to say things that I felt needed to be said. Unfortunately, YouTube started giving me strikes. As a hedge against this happening, I've created backup YouTube channels, Grumpy Old Gamer and Grumpy Old Ufologist. I also created a channel called Grumpy Old Fart over on Rumble, a free speech alternative to YouTube. You can find all of my stuff there, including my political opinion and current events. The link to my Rumble channel, as well as links to let you order my books, are in the description of this video. If you enjoy my content, please like, subscribe, share, and comment. I welcome your comments, even if you disagree with me. Now, on with the video. Hey there, Grumpy Old Fart here. Doing another Outlaw Trails story. This is a continuation of Bill's game following the story Dry Hole. This one's called Rustler's Roundup. So, Earl and the cowboys had arrived with my herd of cattle. The first thing we had to do was get all of the cattle branded with the Rocking A brand. And the men set to doing just that. My character was not a cowboy per se. I did not have a lot of the skills applicable to ranch work. So I left this to Earl and his men. They knew what they were doing and I let them do it. Instead, I rode into town and used the telegraph to contact slaughterhouses and other businesses to contract for the best prices for my cows. Then I bought 40 head of good horses, and had them delivered to my ranch. I told the men that they each could have one as their own personal mount, and it was theirs to keep. We had fun with a lottery to determine what order the men would choose. Earl, of course, had first pick because he was the foreman. I thought that would be a nice bonus for the guys because they do a lot of good hard work, and if they get bonuses, it makes them happy. If they're happy, they work better. They do better work. Anyway, after we got all the cattle branded, Earl came to me and said we were missing about a dozen head. I told him to have the men corral all of the rest of the cattle, and then I sent 3 pairs of men out to ride the boundaries of my property to make sure the fencing was still good. That way Earl and I could go looking for my cattle. Earl located where the cattle had been driven off by a handful of men, and he and I followed the track south to one of those abandoned ranch houses I'd found. Excuse me, our cattle they were in the barn. There was smoke coming from the chimney, and there were 6 horses tied to the hitching rails. When it got dark, we snuck down to the barn and verified that the cows all had my brand. There was a guard on the front porch, and he was half dozing. Earl snuck up behind him and slit his throat. I grabbed my scattergun and my rifle and met Earl at the door. I loaned him my Henry rifle and kept the scattergun. Earl quietly opened the door, and we stepped in. Well, we were trying to be quiet, but it didn't quite work out that way. I failed my sneak roll, and one of them went for his pistol. I splattered him all over the wall with my scattergun. The rest woke up, and Earl covered them while I tied all 4 of them up. We interrogated them and found out that they were planning on altering the brands in the morning and selling them off. They were just standard rustlers. Historically, I was well within my rights to hang them on the spot. I opted to run them into town to the sheriff. Earl and I marched these rustlers all the way back to town in just their long johns to face justice. The sheriff was quite helpful. For whatever reason, there was a gallows out back, and the problem was solved post-haste. Earl brought up the subject of hanging rustlers to the sheriff, and he basically said that if we catch a rustler in the act, it would sure save him a lot of trouble if we handled it ourselves. I asked him about catching people with running irons and other paraphernalia. He said he didn't care. And that back in the Old West, that was pretty common. If you found somebody stealing your horse or your cattle, yeah, it was a hanging offense. And most ranchers dealt with it on their own. Earl and I stopped by the general store on the way out of town. I put in an order for 500 lengths of rope. The man behind the counter was curious, and he asked why we needed so much. I replied, "Rustlers. I got no time for their foolishness. I'm not going to mess with them. That's that." As we rode out of town, that man was running from building to building, spreading the news. And you know what? I don't recall ever having to deal with rustlers again in Bill's game. A little intimidation goes a long way, and once word got around, the rustlers had the idea that, gee, we shouldn't probably mess with his cows. Worked out pretty good. Ha. Anyway, I got a lot more parts to this story, and hopefully you're enjoying them, because I'm enjoying relating them. Ha. You folks have a good day. God bless one and all.